Hello, beautiful souls. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Ladybug Farm. A few weeks ago, we posted a video making this indeterminate tomato trellis. And today we're just going to walk through how we trellis up those tomatoes. You'll need three things. First, you're going to need some sort of string to trellis up your tomatoes. We have done all kinds. When we first started out, we used a twine, just a natural twine. It worked wonderful. I really liked the look of it. The unfortunate thing about the twine is that by the end of the season, it would snap in half to a third to a half of the trellises that we had hooked up with twine of the tomatoes, and then there goes your tomatoes. They're laying on the ground and more susceptible to disease. We also worked on another farm and they had some extra poly rope baling twine. That worked wonderful. It worked the best out of anything that we have used so far. However, just the plastic look, I just didn't like the way it looked, and it was kind of difficult when it came to clean up at the end of the year, because with the hemp, we put that right into the compost with the hemp, and that broke down, or with the twine string. And with the poly rope, it had to be taken out. That couldn't be composted. We have started using just plain old yarn because the kids really like all the colors that we incorporate with the yarn throughout the garden, and it's just something we have started using. So you need that string. The second thing that you will need are what are these?
Scissors!
You will need some scissors, not only just to cut that string, but also to do some pruning. I would highly recommend these scissors. These are Joyce Chen scissors. I used to grow for a restaurant a few years back, and I use these scissors to cut the microgreens, and now we use them for all of our lettuces. I do reserve them just for special things, and they work great for pruning the tomatoes because I can get right in there.
Tomato clips.
And the third thing that you will need are tomato clips. We have just collected them over the years. You can reuse them every year as long as they don't break. We got them from Johnny's. You can also get them online. They are just a nice little clip. This clip hooks around the string, around the tomato, and clips in closed. When we first started out, we would actually use a string to tie up the tomatoes to the stake. And we slowly found out that just the wind moving those tomatoes around, or the tomatoes growing bigger into the string, would cut into the tomatoes. So don't use a string unless it's like several times looped around. We found that these are the best possible thing that we can use for our tomatoes. There are other options out there, but this is just what we prefer to use, tomato clips. So you start with your string. Again, we are starting right on our middle height. Instead of our tall height this year, the middle height is something new that we are trying out this year. Go ahead and cut that all the way down, that string, because we are going to be attaching this string down here to the tomato. I give it a couple knots just to keep it in place. Bring it down to the tomato.
Now I'm going.
Opening up your clip.
No, I had a clip.
Nice, Luca. So you'll notice how he just did it. He put it around the tomato, but it didn't catch the actual string. So we want to open that back up and catch the string right here, so that it keeps it in place, and put it right underneath the crook of the tomato. And you can do a couple just for support. You'll come out every couple weeks and restake them up. And so now it can blow in the wind and it's not going to be damaged here or too tight. Gesundheit. It's not going to damage the tomato. Now this tomato does need to be pruned. Again, everyone can do it a little bit differently. You do not prune your determinate tomatoes, but indeterminate tomatoes you do prune, or at least we prune, to prevent them from becoming wild, huge tangles. So we come right down by the base of the tomato and I cut away all the bottoms. And the reason for that simply is just to keep that dirt splash up. Can I take this away, sir, for just a moment? Just to keep that dirt splash up from coming up onto the leaves and causing any disease. And then if you can see right in here, the tomato is going to send out a lateral shoot right here, and then another shoot right in the crook. This is what people tend to sucker. This lateral shoot here is not going to produce fruit in your indeterminate tomato. This shoot right here is going to basically put off a whole nother tomato plant. This shoot here will grow 10 feet tall if it goes until our first expected frost. So to prevent 27 tomatoes growing all on one, I'm gonna leave the bottom couple. Here's another one growing right here. And inside every arch, wait, Luke. Inside every crook here of the tomato, I'm just gonna come through and pull that off. So I have 1, 2, 3 that I am pulling off. In a few weeks' time, I will have to come back and provide a new string on this shoot and another string on this shoot, because these ones are going to grow up and produce tomatoes just as abundantly as this tomato plant right here. So we have 8 tomatoes, indeterminate varieties, now trellised up. These are all cherry tomatoes. They're a variety called Blondo Kofchen. We've been saving this seed for about 7 years. It's a beautiful, tiny orange cherry tomato. You can see this one right here has 2 strings attached to one plant. And that is simply because, again, it comes back to suckering. We do not sucker every shoot off that tomato. So one of those shoots right here, one of those sides coming up, was large enough to quantify having another trellis up onto it. This is typically just seen in our greenhouses locally. We like to do it. We don't have hundreds of tomatoes. If you had hundreds of tomatoes, this requires a lot of labor. Probably the most common way to grow hundreds of tomatoes is going to be the Florida weave style if you are planting tomatoes out in the field. But again, this is just what we prefer to do here. So we are back at the very first trellis that we built this year. The video we posted about a month ago. We have 8 indeterminate tomatoes along on this trellis. Again, indeterminates just require a little bit more space because they grow so massive. Also in this bed, we have sunflowers, amaranth, cantaloupe, watermelon, and red bell peppers, just to keep the diversity within the garden bed. 2 weeks ago, we came out and trellised up these tomatoes, just like you saw with the other tomatoes a few seconds ago. The only tomato that I have revisited today is this one right here. And I think that this black plastic mulching is definitely helping to at least prevent the soil splash up onto the bottom leaves, because these bottom leaves look so healthy. So that's a really good sign. You can see I have 4 lines for one plant, and I could do more lines. This is why we sucker, because if you don't sucker your tomatoes, you're gonna have 30 lines by the end of the year. Or what's gonna happen is if you don't provide some sort of support for several of those shoots coming up, several of those stems. A thunderstorm's going to come along and they're just going to crack and fall off, or they're going to bend and hit the soil and get a little bit more prone to diseases. Thank you for joining us here. I hope this can help you with your tomatoes. There are many, many different ways to grow and trellis up indeterminate tomatoes, but this is what we have found over the years that works best for us. Again, it is a lot more labor intensive, but the fruit that you can yield from these indeterminate tomatoes can hopefully take you all the way until your first expected frost in the fall. Best of luck, and may you have a beautiful day ahead.